Welcome to Bankruptcy, Through the Looking Glass, with Barry Levine.
Welcome to Bankruptcy, Through the Looking Glass with Barry Levine. I'm your host, Zofia Morales, and today's episode is The Evolution of Bankruptcy Law, How Changes Have Impacted Consumers and Businesses. Welcome back, Barry. I'm so happy to have you here with me.
It's always nice to be here.
So, can you describe some indicators that a business should consider bankruptcy as a viable option for restructuring
Well,
rather
I
than,
tell you something, usually
yeah,
small business owners are oblivious to what's going on in their businesses, but certain indications are if you're on COD with everybody,
mm,
cash plus $100,
yeah,
nobody will deliver anything unless you pay. You start running into arrears on trust fund taxes. Those are meals taxes, sales tax, and withholding tax.
right.
Theoretically, you're supposed to withhold them for the government, but they happen to be, in my experience, they're a very easy bit of cash flow to dip into because nobody's sitting there with a gun to make sure that, you're going to pay, you're withholding the money, but nobody's going to make sure that you pay it to the government.
Yeah,
And the other
exactly.
thing, I once had a client who ran a pharmacy and a health and beauty aid store. And when he was facing problems, he was able to sell American Express money orders. And when he
Oh.
needed to pay for supplies, he wrote himself a money order.
Oh my. Oh,
So I mean, but the thing is, you have to you have to pay attention to these things, and very often, the business is great, nobody has any worries, and life goes on. It's sort of
yeah.
when the shit starts to hit the fan that people realize that maybe they need to do something. And the problem is, it's always much better to plan in advance for these things. Like, for instance, if you're the type of employer that has problems paying over withholding taxes,
Right.
which you're personally liable for if you don't pay it because they're trust fund taxes,
Yeah, that's a detail.
I suggest to people that maybe they look into employee leasing. What happens
Ah,
then is all your employees are leased to some company who sends you a bill every month for their pay and the taxes. So you don't run into that problem. You just get a bill that you pay. You don't run into the problem of having to scramble together. Or I used it for a $5,000 shipment that I needed.
yeah, exactly. As more of a float than an actual
Yeah.
trust. Yeah,
Yeah. But
exactly.
those are really the major things. I mean, and also if sales are going down, but usually that's how you mask those problems by paying the bills using, money that you have on hand to use for other things.
Right. So, in your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions that business owners have about bankruptcy and its role in restructuring?
Well, I think it's just perhaps the uncertainty of the unknown. They don't know what to expect. I can tell you from my own recent experience with two small business subchapter 5, chapter 11s, they're a royal pain in the ass. There's a lot of work involved. Every debtor is suspect that maybe they're doing something or something they shouldn't be doing. And my feeling is, sometimes there are other ways to restructure a business without going through a bankruptcy court,
For
which,
example,
I do a lot of that. I mean, I do a lot of, when you have a business, it's the same thing in a bankruptcy. The value of the business in a liquidation situation is really only the value of its assets.
yeah.
A lot of the times, those assets are encumbered. And what I've been doing for decades is, for lack of a better word, phrase, a dump buyback. What we do is in Massachusetts and other states, you can do this. A company can do what's called an assignment for the benefit of creditors, which is a liquidation of a business, not a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And the reason I do that for small businesses, it's not as intrusive. There's no 341 meetings. There's no, the trustee in a bankruptcy doesn't realize where the corporation ends and the individual begins. And the major thing is corporations don't get discharges in a bankruptcy. All that happens is their assets get liquidated. So an assignment enables us, the assignee, to uh, he can liquidate the assets in a commercially reasonable manner, and that can be either through a private sale, a public auction, or just abandoning them if there's no equity in them.
Right.
And that can be a lot, easier way to reorganize than going through a Chapter 11, be it a small business or a full-blown Chapter 11. I mean, they're very costly. Again, speaking from experience, I'm way beyond my retainer in both of these cases, and you have to hope that ultimately you're going to get paid. And 90% of the Chapter 11s are unsuccessful. So
Wow.
I sort of, and sometimes, businesses after a while are just not meant to be. Whatever market they had doesn't exist, or, what's been happening lately is a lot of businesses, because of government largesse during COVID, were able to survive, but people's shopping and buying habits have changed post COVID, and they're finding they can't, they were able to survive, but now they have so much debt because of the government largesse that they can't afford to pay it. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing a lot of is these just straight liquidations because the business isn't meant to be anymore, followed by the principal filing a bankruptcy because the principal is on the hook for the SBA loan and whatever else.
Right. Oh
It
my
keeps me off
goodness.
the street. It's not pretty, but
So,
America.
yeah, ain't it great? Well, at least you get a chance to have a clean slate and start again with something else and go another direction. At least
Well,
in
that's
theory.
that still is, at least today anyway.
Yeah.
You're entitled to go out of business and start another business. I mean, I've over the decades, I've represented a number of entrepreneurs. I think a couple of them actually filed bankruptcies for them 4 times. They had a great idea. It lasted for 8, 10 years, went down. They file a bankruptcy, start something else, and the same cycle. And for instance, even if let's say you're the principal of a company that's either filed a Chapter 7 or an assignment, and there's a public auction, you can show up at the public auction and buy your stuff back. I mean, and set up a new company.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
That
been
sounds
known to happen.
promising, actually.
Well, the thing is, it happens both in commercial situations. It happens sometimes, like in real estate foreclosures. Somebody has a friend who shows up at the auction and buys the place back. So people, you have to look at it as you're sort of fighting a war. I mean, when you have a lot of debt, you're really an indentured servant, and very often these businesses, the small business owner isn't taking, oh, the last time I took a paycheck was, oh God, 2020 or whatever,
Yeah.
or maybe even 1822, who knows? And the thing is, who are they working for? They're working for their creditors, and if they have employees, they're working for their employees. They're basically providing them a social service. And if there's nothing, it might be an old Jewish joke, but I won't tell you. It's not clean. Uh,
You can tell
uh,
me after we turn off the recording.
that's if I remember it. But I know the punchlines. That's the problem. I take after my father. He was a Yiddish joke machine in his day, one after the other. And unfortunately, I wasn't very good at understanding Yiddish. I would just sit there like this. Uh,
Okay, whatever. So what are some specific legal strategies companies can use during the bankruptcy process to ensure they emerge stronger?
there really isn't. They have to be able to make money. They
Yeah.
have to pay their ongoing expenses. They have to pay their secure debt, their landlord, and then hopefully generate enough money to be able to fund the plan.
Hmm.
And it's not easy. I mean, one of the cases I have going on now, one of these small business Chapter 5s, the business, I don't necessarily see it surviving. There's no expansion. It's just status quo. And so what's the end result? Even if it does survive, how much a creditor is going to get paid? Where's the money going to come from? It's
Yeah.
it's not particularly easy. And then very often, if you think about the principle of the business saying, okay, I'm going to put money into the business myself. Well, does it make more sense to put money into a failing business or to start fresh? I mean,
Well, yeah, there's that.
I once, I think somewhere in these questions is about, using other assets to keep a business afloat. And one of my favorite stories is these guys were in the HVAC business. There were three partners, and two were brothers, and the third, I don't know, relative or something like that. And the two brothers came to see me. It seemed that they owe $60,000 to the IRS because they hadn't been paying the withholding for their employees.
Right. Yeah.
I suggested filing a Chapter 11, easy to deal with if they only had tax liability. They went back to their partner, and the partner said no, he used the equity in his house to pay off the IRS. So, being an inveterate cynic and also from Brooklyn, I put them in my calendar for about a year, and they came back in about 8 months, and it's the same thing. They owed 80 grand this time to the IRS, and it was the two brothers. The third partner didn't bother to schlep down to see me, and I had the same recommendation: use this house again
Oh, wow.
to pay off the IRS. This time I put them in my calendar for 6 months, and they certainly came back. They owed the IRS about the same 80 grand. He no longer had any equity in his house to pay them off.
Right.
We filed the Chapter 11, and I think they survived 60 days before we had to close it down.
Oh, wow.
And you reach a point where and this is the problem that small business owners very often have. You have to know when you're going to say enough is enough.
Yeah.
I'm not going to continue to put money into this business. Like I said, you're running a social service for your employees, or you're indentured servant to your creditors. I mean,
Yeah.
what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and a lot of times I know, being of an entrepreneurial mindset and having been through a few business rounds myself, it feels like it's your baby. It can seem like you're killing your baby, I think.
Something. You're absolutely right. I mean, I liquidated. It was a very interesting product. It was like a clearinghouse for people who were looking to rent an apartment.
Oh,
Uh, you could see apartments. They had brokers, and they had people looking for apartments, and it was fascinating. Unfortunately, the guy who started the company took some investors' money, and he went back to Vietnam and liquidated the business. But the poor guy who created the software, the guy who at the
yeah,
end was the guy behind it, was like his baby. He spent, years putting this all together, and it's difficult. But listen, I got over when my parents moved out of our apartment in Brooklyn. Life goes on. It's no big deal.
exactly. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of stakeholder communication while you're going through one of these restructurings?
Well, stakeholders, I rarely deal with anything other than closely held corporations. So usually it's a family, it's one or two people, so everybody is involved. The
Yeah.
principal of the debtor is basically the debtor. So there really is no need. Everybody knows what's going on. Whether you're talking to unsecured creditors, that depends. I mean, mostly, the unsatisfying thing about doing this, especially in Chapter 11s, is most of the creditors don't give a shit. They don't read the stuff you send them. They don't pay attention, and you like. You've probably heard the phrase "negotiating against yourself." I mean, very rarely get feedback, and it's
Mm,
frustrating. I
yeah.
mean, because you have nobody to talk to. I can talk to myself, but that gets boring after a while.
Well, you agree with yourself. There's no challenge there.
Oh no, not all the time. It's not easy.
So, what role does like a comprehensive financial analysis play in the restructuring process when you're doing a
Well, as
bankruptcy?
someone that I mentioned, I'm a cynic.
Yeah,
I think you can do whatever you want with projections. I mean,
sure.
to a certain extent, it's all bullshit. You can
Right.
put in the parameters, and if you want it to come out this way, it comes out this way. I mean, you have to. It is what it is, and the only way you could really tell is by actual performance. And getting back to I actually, it was a novelty. I was representing a creditor in a small business Chapter 11, and every month they're supposed to do projections. By the fourth or fifth month, it was a comedy. It was nothing ever matched, and it's like, why bother? I
Yeah.
mean, and that's why I don't put a lot of stock in it. I mean, really, if they're making some money, and if they can pay their ongoing expenses, I mean, you can project from today until tomorrow. What does it really mean? I
Yeah.
got a hangnail. Business didn't get wasn't that good.
Yeah. Well, and all kinds of unexpected things happen. We as humans, I think, are hopeless optimistics many times.
Well, you find out that you probably remember Eddie Haskell. There are a lot of Eddie Haskells out there. You look beautiful today, Mrs. Cleaver, and they, come up with every story and every other story, and there's reality.
So, what success stories have you seen? We've talked a lot about a lot of wipeouts here.
Well, success stories, a number of them, but not many are done in the bankruptcy
Oh,
court.
okay.
I once had one. It was a very good restaurant. It was in a Chapter 11, and the judge at the time, Judge Queden, who was out in Worcester, he wanted to know why, when I was at the confirmation hearing, I didn't bring a sampling of their food, and he had a point. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. This will tell us if they have something good to sell, right?
if it's worth saving.
Yeah.
But it ate there a few times. It was quite good. But lots of times, how do you measure success? Is if the business is surviving in one shape or another. And over my decades, I've kept people in business, not necessarily through a Chapter 11, in other ways. And one of the, even though he ultimately stiffed me on my fee, one of the best was a guy was in the cabinet business, very
Oh,
big company, and he had gone to 3 or 4 lawyers, and they said, hey, he had tax liability and all this other stuff. And we did one of these assignments for the benefit of creditors, and we had a public auction while the new company was doing business behind paper.
yeah.
And he got his business back. He wound up selling it for almost $2 million. And
Nice.
like I said, I didn't get paid, but I did all the paperwork for his sale.
Well, that stinks. I'm sorry you didn't get paid on that because it sounds like you
Well,
got him a very good outcome.
as some people would say, he should only drop dead, but that's just me.
So, what do you recommend for somebody who kind of recognizes themselves in what we were describing at the top of this episode? It's like, yeah, that account over there with the money in it, I maybe I can float that and sell the stuff fast enough to fill it back up before the government knows that I did that.
Oh, and I tell you something that the it can take the government a very long time to find out that you're not paying the withholding or meals tax. It's an interesting thing because some companies, the amounts that they can accrue in unpaid debt can be in the hundreds of thousands,
Wow.
and then suddenly they're found out.
Yeah, and then it becomes a real crisis. But let's say that we're more aware of ourselves and what's happening, and we sense that we're headed into this dangerous territory. What are your words of wisdom?
Well, the thing is, you have to be realistic in what's going on. I mean, and you have to. I mean, most of these people are basically, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you have to say enough is enough. and then try to formulate a plan that is going to enable your business to survive. Sometimes, like I say, it's not meant to be. I
Yeah.
mean, very often a lot of these people, when they, uh, they can't stay in business and they wind up taking a break, and they realize it's nice collecting a salary, a paycheck every week, and I don't have to worry about making payroll and paying the withholding taxes and this, that, and the other thing. It gives them a nice mental health break. And then when they come back, they're a little bit more focused on what needs to be done.
Yeah, I like
And on
that.
the other hand, sometimes they're not.
Well, all you can do is keep trying.
Hey,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the stories and wisdom today, Barry.
well,
It's been
thank you.
very informative. Thanks for tuning in to Bankruptcy Through the Looking Glass with Barry Levine. To connect with Barry, head to levineslaw.com and be sure to like, subscribe, and review.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey through bankruptcy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.